Let's begin today in Minnesota, where tensions between protesters and police reached a boiling point following the death of George Floyd. He is the black man who appeared to be suffocated by a white police officer during an attempted arrest on Monday. Thousands gathered demanding justice after a video was released of the officer using his knee to pin down Floyd's neck. Protesters threw rocks at police, chanting, "I can't breathe." Those are the words that Floyd used himself during the arrest. Officers fired tear gas into the crowd in response. CBS News Chief Justice and Homeland Security correspondent Jeff Pegues is in Minneapolis. He's been following the latest from the very beginning, Jeff, and you had an opportunity, Jeff, to speak to the family of George Floyd. What did they tell you?
Well, they are obviously grieving right now, and it was a tough interview to do because you can hear the pain in their voices and you could see it on their faces. One of his brothers was wiping tears from his eyes as he talked about what happened here at this corner on Monday. And you see behind me the growing memorial, and people continue to show up here. But the family wants action. They were thankful to the protesters who came out yesterday, but they want to see action, and Vlad, they want to see the officers held accountable.
Yeah, and I know, Jeff, a number of protesters have been calling for actual criminal charges to be filed, but I thought it was very interesting that the officers were fired so quickly, but also that the FBI was asked to come in and investigate within 24 hours of this death, and asked by the police chief to come in and investigate. How common is that? Because I know you've covered, sadly, a number of these sort of things.
Yeah, well, it's something, Anne-Marie, that frankly we're seeing more and more. Because post-Ferguson, police departments essentially have a playbook on what to do if you have these clashes between police and the community. How do you diffuse the tension? And when you have video, the likes of which people have been watching in this case over the last couple of days, it is the kind of video that spurs police departments to act swiftly. Why? Because they want to reduce tension in these neighborhoods and in this city as a whole. And so that's why you saw this swift action. And yeah, it's not something that you regularly see. They took action within 24 hours of this story making headlines. They fired the 4 police officers, but there is still this investigation, which is ongoing, and there are a couple of different investigations. And frankly, the family last night is telling me that they want to see what they view as an independent investigation. While the police department has called for the FBI to come in, that doesn't seem good enough for the family. They don't view that as independent enough for an investigation like this.
And Jeff, I note that your live shot is right in front of the location where the incident took place, and I can see people placing balloons and other mementos as a memorial to his life. And there are a lot of comparisons, Jeff, as you know, being made between this case and Eric Garner here in New York City. As Anne-Marie pointed out, you've covered, sadly, so many of these police killings. You've even written books about it. Walk us through some of the similarities and some of the differences.
Well, when I watched that tape, you know, the first thing that came to mind was Eric Garner. Why? Because of those 3 words, "I can't breathe." George Floyd uttered the same words that Eric Garner did. And so the similarities, in my view, start right there with that. And then you had the onlookers surrounding the police officers, as they did in Staten Island, sort of pleading with the officers to stop, and yet the actions continue. Now, whether those actions rise to a criminal case, we'll just have to see. In fact, the police union has come out and said, you know, don't rush to judgment in this case. And that's frankly what we hear in a lot of these cases. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. But there are these similarities. It is eerily similar. And again, because of those 3 words, "I can't breathe," which now, once again, has become the rallying cry for the protesters out here, as it did for protesters during the Black Lives Movement, post-Ferguson, post-Staten Island, post-Freddie Gray in Baltimore. So this rings familiar for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly does. And, I mentioned that the officers had been fired, but now I'm learning that almost sort of half of the officers that are fired in Minnesota end up getting reinstated. Do we know what the next steps for these officers are?
Well, the most pressing thing that is probably on their minds is whether there are going to be criminal charges in this case. We don't know when that could happen. It could happen today. It could happen in 3 weeks. We don't know how fast they're going to move in this case. Obviously they have the video there, and that is a pretty powerful piece of evidence. And I just say the video, but there are really several different angles of different video. There's security camera that we saw from a restaurant on this corner behind me. That also offers a look at the beginning of this incident, of this interaction between George Floyd and the police officers. So where this goes, we'll have to see. Whether these officers will be reinstated, I'm sure typically in a lot of cities with police departments, you have a formal grievance process. It is something that they have in their contracts based on their collective bargaining agreements with the cities where they work. And so I'm sure that there is a process in place for them to potentially appeal this decision. I'm not exactly briefed on the details of that, but there usually is in cases like this. So we'll have to see where this goes. We'll have to see if there is a possibility that they could ever get their jobs back, because of what's on that tape. But right now, the focus of this community seems to be whether there will be charges against these officers, criminal charges, which again is something that you don't often see. It is difficult to bring a case against officers who are seen as just doing their job. And it is even more difficult to indict and convict police officers. So we'll have to see where this goes.
But Jeff, it's interesting, and you pointed this out in the report that you filed for CBS this morning, a couple of things. One, that it is, we don't see it often that police officers are fired this quickly in the wake of an incident like this. But something else that you reported, you had in your piece videotape that showed Mr. Floyd being led away by those police officers. And according to the reporting out there, the police officers said that he was risking arrest. But what did the video show, at least that particular piece of video?
Yeah, and this is video that we obtained late yesterday. It aired for the first time on CBS Evening News, and it showed what appeared to be the beginning of this interaction. And the person who handed the video over to us said that he wanted to make sure that that video got out there because, in his view, it showed that the officers or the police department's account of what started all of this was not accurate. The police officers or the police department was saying that Floyd was resisting arrest, but this restaurant owner who had that security video said, look, if you look at that tape, it does not show Floyd resisting arrest. So it's one more piece of evidence, potentially, that investigators and prosecutors could use in this case. But there are several other pieces. Something we haven't seen is the body camera video. The officers had body cameras, and according to the police department, they were activated. So that is something else that we could see at some point. In fact, in previous cases similar to this, you had police departments relatively quickly showing the body camera footage. We'll see if they do that in this case. They might say, listen, this is too sensitive. The investigation is still underway. We might not do that. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, well, somebody has already seen that body camera footage, and certainly the police department was as you point out, was very, very quick to release them, to fire them. We'll see. They were called out because I believe you reported earlier that a fraud was being committed. Doesn't sound like a violent crime. A lot of questions that still need to be answered. Jeff, thank you so much.